see what's
Good
on the
morning. It's May 23rd, 2015. This is Veruschka, Normandeau, and I'm interviewing John here in Lower Puna, Big Island, Hawaii. So, hello there. Tell
Good
me your
morning.
name and what do you do?
My name is John Joseph Brault, Brault. I'm a full-time artist. This is my 17th year, and we do both paintings and sculptures.
And how long have you lived here?
I think this is my 17th year living here.
And what brought you here?
Well, obviously the natural beauty brings a lot of people here. It brought me here, but I think primarily I came here to be healthy, to live a healthy life, to know where my food came from, to have access to affordable land, and to promote an art career that people would enjoy, that all people could enjoy.
And how did you find exactly this land where I have encountered you in, right here at the edge of some of the last lava flow from the 80s, right on a very rugged coastline and in sight of an active volcano?
Yes, like I mentioned, that we have a lot of very special natural beauty here that I think the world acknowledges. But to answer your question, I was invited here by Uncle Robert Keali'iho'omalu back in the late 90s. He had a vision of building a traditional Hawaiian cultural center that featured the music of our area, the lifestyle, the agrarian lifestyle of our area, and the culture with the fishing and natural architecture. So I was invited in, and it was definitely something I wasn't expecting because I'm technically the closest living survivor of Mount St. Helens. Everybody closer to the peak of Mount St. Helens than our home, than my father's home, passed on in that eruption. So I certainly wasn't intending on building a career in a volcanic community, but again, I was invited to come, and it was one of my first stories that I shared with Uncle, and he had gone through the similar experience with his community, even though he still had his house. History, we all know that Kalapana lost 130 or so houses and most of our community back in 1990. So I came here invited as an artist for the cultural center, and we bonded on rebuilding communities that had been stricken by volcanic natural disasters, and we got to work on that right away back in 1990, and we're still doing that work today.
And what are you motivated by right here, right now, 17 years later?
That's a good question, because as an artist, my career has evolved. I do enjoy serving the people. We are international now with the art and the ability to serve people. But the reason why, to be quite honest, that I feel that I'm still here is this is a unique place. I would call it an intentional community because the families here over the decades, we've chosen as a community priorities in behavior, if you will. And what makes this place special, and the reason I'm still here and I plan on staying here, is we're also a sanctuary, and in Hawaiian that's called Pu'uhonua. And again, this is something that Uncle and I were quite intentful on around 2000, turn of the century, is a place where people could come and be safe and could take a break and have some time to do their healing, to reinstate family values, to capture their breath, but again, fundamentally a sanctuary where all people are accepted. And part of that is other intentful aspects of our community is we're a tolerant community. We tolerate all religions, all races, all nationalities, and all political beliefs. And we're also, most importantly, an aloha community. Whereas even if we have serious problems in and around our village here, everything is dealt with through love as opposed to a heavy-handed police state style of response. So again, we are an intentional community, and I think if you were to ask this question to most people around me today, it would be explicit that we are tolerant and we're loving, and I will stay here as long as that's the pinnacle of this community.
Well, on that note, could I ask you, do you experience aloha here in your life?
Pretty much steadily. I do. It comes in different shapes and forms, and everybody's got their own perceptions, but...
Do you feel like it gets challenged and tested?
It does, and that's the juxtaposition of being a tolerant community, is when you love everybody, you're going to get all kinds. And just that dynamism and the idea that all people are different, it's a double-edged sword, because it's what makes humanity so special, that nobody is exactly the same. But at the same time, we need integrity. We need to be sustainable. We need to offer a safe and viable future for our children. So there's got to be limits somewhere. And that's the double edge, is you have to love everybody, but at the same time, to keep the integrity of the community, I'll call it the moral fabric, there needs to be some rules.
Yeah. So in this day and age and in this moment, in regards to your art and your work, what are you motivated by there?
I'm most motivated by realizing that I can inspire people through my work, especially the young people. And my inner circle, my family, my friends, they're quite aware that we've been able to do some historic art these last few years, more specifically millennium statues. And to have a hobby, to do what you love, to earn a living at what you love is a real privilege. Anybody who does anything that makes people happy, it could be a doctor, a teacher, a coach, an artist, a musician, I think those people should feel blessed. The opportunity to get up in the morning and inspire people and or make people happy every day is a phenomenal blessing. And anyone in that position, like I said, a doctor or an artist, should thank their lucky stars, and I do every day. I'm in service, and I'm very intentful about that. And if people didn't ask me day in and day out for what I offer, I wouldn't do it.
What would you say is some of the biggest hardship you've experienced in your work or in your personal life in the last few years?
The biggest hardship, off the top of my head, I'm not going to think about this too much. I'm going to try to keep it on a spiritual plane, if you will. The biggest hardship is the lack of understanding, or the lack of truth, if you will, culturally, from Americans at large. And again, this is a double-edged sword, because I do love all people, but unfortunately, as a culture, I feel that Americans have lost sight that a nation is only as great as its art. And this is my hardship, because as a self-trained, lifetime artist, intimate with other top artists, we hear things that just absolutely don't make any sense, and is basically your consciousness of the average American. Let me give you some examples. Oh, the starving artist. Well, might not be a positive response, but this is one of the few things that ruffles my feathers, because obviously we're mature professionals, and there's a kind of a stupid assumption there that, oh, you're a starving artist. It kind of assumes that just because I'm an artist, I'm starving. But would anybody in their right mind pick a lifetime career that would put themselves in such jeopardy? So it just doesn't make any sense. So again, we're talking specifically about frustrations as a professional artist. That there's a couple of them. The lack of understanding that a nation is only as great as its art. History shows us that. Egypt shows us that. The Anasazi shows us that. The Hawaiians. The founding fathers of the United States. So we're richer than ever. We are an empire. We're a crashing empire, in my opinion, if you look objectively at the socioeconomic and the international banking system. So we have all this phenomenal wealth. Even our most poor people have access to goods, commodities, and services that have been inaccessible in world history. So my objective question is, where's the art? And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and what would you describe is your personal art about? What are your themes and what are you wanting to convey?
My overall umbrella theme is God's beauty. And if I can't see it and bring it out, I won't do it. And if other people don't see it, then I won't do it. I want to know what everybody perceives as God's beauty. Sometimes I see it and I need to bring it out for them. But on the other side of the coin, I'm also listening. I want to know what the universal beauty is. I absolutely believe, and I've proven, there is a level of beauty out there that all people concur with. Let me give you an example. This brings us back to Hawaii. Well, surely everybody has different tastes of art, but the concept of universal beauty, may I please give an example? I've never heard a human being say that a sea turtle was ugly. I've never seen a human being not get excited about a breaching whale. I've never heard a woman, a man, child, or anybody not just be totally awestruck by the tropical fish that we have in our coral reefs and their beautiful colors and their crazy geometries. These are just three off the top of my mind of a concept of universal beauty, and it proves there is a beauty out there that everybody concurs with. As an artist, that's what I want to know. That's where my mind always is. Not my freaky dreams, not my fantasies, not something that'll profit, but the beauty that everybody sees.
And here, that's, there's no doubt that's pure nature. That's not what man's making, it's pure nature. Huh?
Nature is the only common ground man was ever gonna have. And here's a great irony. We all like to put out our moral discourse, the Catholics, the Christians, the Buddhas, the Krishnas, the Allahs, okay? But when it comes right down to it, we know as scientists and ecologists of a global hydrological cycle, we know that the water we drink and the air that we breathe is going to reach its way back to the ocean and into another country in 1 year. Science has proven that. We can trace Chernobyl, we can trace Fukushima, we can trace Mount St. Helens literally to the backyard of every country. So we see the circulation of nutrients, of water, of healthy soil, and what's gonna bind us all together, whether we like it or not, is the seriousness of our ecological issues.
Yeah. So working as hard as you do and being as committed as you are to your craft, if you had all the money in the world right now, what would you be doing?
Wow. I'm pausing, but the answer is automatic to me. It is doing what I am doing, is to establish a trust fund. And if we're going to have all this advanced technology, spaceships and satellites and missiles and atomic bombs, I'll ask the question that I ask all the finest scientists, including Nobel laureates, that I've asked for the last 25 years. Just like the art. Where is the art, America? And where is the solar world? Our solar technology is so advanced, it's so economical, it's so beautiful, and not only that, the people absolutely love it. It's a no-brainer, Veruschka. You start a trust fund, and there's got two main tracks in there: people who want to build solar energy systems and people who want to monitor and keep the water clean. That's what I would do, because without your energy and without your clean water, there is no life anywhere. That's what I would do with unlimited money. And I hope as a trust fund and as a people's artist that we will be successful in establishing that. And I'm sure that we will, because I don't believe we're going to do anything unless we get the wholehearted agreement and blessings of the public at large. Just like the idea of universal beauty, is going to be universal acceptance in the solar projects and in the water management projects. If I can give you an example, I'm sure once we go to build a big solar energy system, a lot of people are going to say, oh, making solar panels creates a lot of hazardous waste. Well, that was true 20 years ago, but guess what? We have to recycle everything now. So yeah, we did generate some hazardous waste, and we filtered it, and we cleaned it, and we put it right back into the shop, and it's not touching the earth.
Well, speaking of solar and the earth, I can't help but notice that your current gift shop that's set up here on the lava on the coast happens to be about perhaps 200 yards away from the first official UFO landing pad, a welcoming site. Is there anything you have a comment about that?
I have very little comments about that, but I've thought it through quite a bit, and I think it's very important that if we don't know, we admit that we don't know. I also think it's important that we keep an open mind. In other words, on these issues, I think we need to stay humble. So if we were to look at both sides of the Star Visitor Sanctuary, we got the believers, that's fine, and we got the disbelievers, that's fine too. Open-mindedness is important, and my comment when many of the local citizens in our community wanted to do this, it got a lot of press, even though at a physical level it was really not much. Circle of stones out on the lava dedicated to a concept, but it got a lot of press. So I think it's important that people keep an open mind. Again, man's got a lot to learn. We're not going to learn it if we think we know everything already.
I think the beauty of the act of it was just the intention of what if we let them know they're welcome. And it really, there's no other stigma around it for science or fear or phobia, but just, I guess what you're referring to, just the open mind. And what if we don't know? And what if we neutralize any of the fears or concepts about it, but say and keep that space open? And anyway.
Well, the elders in our community also concurred that they weren't willing to pass judgment, yay or nay, on this issue anyway. However, we thought it would be valuable. The public at large feels as though the United States government has got a lot of secrets on this topic. And of course we live in a society with a lot of fear and a lot of control, and so I believe the elders here concurred to say yes on this topic, simply to differentiate ourselves from the federal government, in that we're saying publicly we're open to this, and we don't want anything to hide. In fact, we'll invite them here if in fact something like that exists.
It's almost the biggest rebellion.
It's a non-confrontational rebellion, and I was very much hoping that the questions that you offered today would bring up this idea of non-confrontational activism. That's where it's at. And this brings us back to those things that are good for all people that we've explicitly identified here in our community. Things that are good for all people. Let's support that. Let's put our energy into that. And so, of course, there's so much change to be made in the world today. How are we going to do that in a non-confrontational way? Let me tell you, the biggest problem is a confrontation, divisiveness, and lack of harmony. This forces us to think things through on what are those things that are good for everybody. There's always going to be conflicts, but they need to be channeled into harmony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're all figuring out our own way there.
Again, it's very tricky because the great gift from God is that we're all different. So here we are, all trying to get along, but we're all different. So really, here's the blessing and here's the curse. So again, I see the blessing. I think we all do. The opposites attract, and birds of a like feather flock together. So that's all good. But again, what are those things that unite us all? And this brings us back to the water and the soil.
Well, since we're on the topic of conflict, you've mentioned before being contacted by Nobel laureates. Would you care to share a story about what those circumstances were?
The circumstances is the most important thing. How do people come together, and for what purpose? Why would such public figures like this come knocking on my little door? What's the agenda? What's the goal? Who are these people? And they're all projects. We can look at anything as a project: raising a family, building a home, running a business, working for someone else. These are just great people with big public projects. So to answer your question, the first Nobel laureate I worked for was my all-time favorite. He was already a hero of mine. It was Dr. Linus Pauling. He's the only person to win 2 Nobel laureates in the United States. One was in peace during the Nixon administration in his protest against the Vietnam War. And his second Nobel laureate was in science for his vitamin C work, which today, still today, is the #1 way people are achieving longevity. Specifically answer your question, I was a big fan of his. I read all of his books, and he invited me in to inspect his laboratory when I worked for TSI Technical, which was basically a legal laboratory inspecting agencies. And I had to go into his labs at Stanford and test all of his fume hoods to make sure there was nothing leaking in his labs. And not only being a young man who admired his Nobel laureates, I became acquainted with him, and his laboratory environment was only laboratory I've been in my life, and I think that's saying a lot. My next Nobel laureate is in the national laboratory systems in the federal government. I've seen most of the national labs from the inside out, but Dr. Linus Pauling was the only lab who had all young people working for him. And the reason why is he understood this concept of open-mindedness, and they were trying to discover. And maybe this connects to the Star Sanctuary, whereas if we've all made decisions and we know everything already, it's kind of hard to make a new discovery. This guy obviously understood his creativity, and he had everybody in his labs were the youngest people I saw at Stanford. And he himself was an enlightened human being, totally happy, totally accomplished, and his office, I still remember it to this day. You couldn't see his desk, you couldn't see his shelves, you couldn't see the floor. It's very well read, and everything stacked up to the ceiling. A wonderful man, bless his heart. He lives in my heart to this day. The second Nobel laureate that I was invited to be with was a really special deal, and I don't like to talk about it very much. was the father of the atomic bomb, Dr. Edward Teller. If I remember right, it was April 1996, and Dr. Edward Teller was 94 years old at the time. And we had a VIP conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and 300 of America's top scientists, and myself and my group was invited. And so the conditions of Dr. Teller inviting my small group of scientists. The conditions, to answer your question, for me to meet Dr. Edward Teller is we were doing research in the national laboratories under new economic stimulus packages where small tech firms who needed access to equipment and knowledge could do a cooperative research with the government, and that was their way of stimulating the economy. So we were assigned to our research group one of, if not the, at the time, top American physicist, Dr. Fred Mueller, another dear friend of mine. And Fred wanted me to meet the Nobel laureate, Edward Teller. There was talk amongst the scientific groups that we had designed very and powerful solar energy systems. The energy systems themselves were completely recyclable, and that we had blueprints for an absolutely non-polluting manufacturing facility. So when Dr. Edward Teller heard about this, he wanted to meet us, and we spent a day together, and we ate lunch together, and he passed on just a couple years after that. So it was a really special time for our ecological solar group to have basically been invited to meet the most accomplished scientist of our century, and he said in front of all 300 national laboratory scientists that he thought our work was the most humanitarian work he had ever seen in his life. That was my second Nobel laureate encounter, direct and personal. My third was through my ex-wife, who had worked intimately with Dalai Lama in taking care of the refugees in Nepal out of Tibet. And before, during, and after our marriage, we were very active in sponsoring the education, the housing, and the welfare with food and medical of young refugees. We were sponsors, and we did that for years. And Dalai Lama personally called my wife and thanked her for all the work that we had done. And most recent, one of our children was picked as an up-and-coming Lama to go into their monasteries. So that was the third, was more through my wife and not me personally, but nevertheless was a product of our work, and our work was acknowledged by yet another Nobel laureate.
And you have shared with me that you have a book ready to be printed in the near future. Would you like to share about your book?
I would like to share about my book because it's all about the sharing, and I'm so excited because this book is simply my 100 finest pieces of public art that the public themselves really demanded and pushed me to do. But again, I'm meeting so many wonderful people, so many accomplished people. I thought, the eye candy is nice, but let's put a little meat in there. And so with the 100 pieces of public art, we're also going to have 100, what I call, the title of the book is called The Dichotomies of Life. And the reason why I'm adding the 100 dichotomies is that I feel that we're still very much in an era of dualism in our thinking, the categorical thinking, where everything we do in community, legislation, raising our families, running our small business, we gotta be black and white about everything. Yes or no, right or wrong, male or female, good or bad, spiritual or non-spiritual, on and on and on. We're gonna just break everything right into two simple black and white pieces. take a look at your brain. It's split too. But you know what? There's some connectors in between, and there's a lot of other areas that we need to use. And so the book is really focusing on this mental shortcoming, if you will. Our habits, our upbringings, our simplicity is to just divide everything into black or white, right or wrong. The universe is just full of paradoxes, just full of ironies, and a good parent comes to realize it. A guy trying to earn an honest living comes to realize it. And we kind of get forced by society and the profit margins in our family and the tax man to always go on one side of another, where in fact the truth often lies in between. It's not to say that everything should be compromising. It's just simply say that not everything is black and white. So I have 100 life paradoxes to shed light on what will always be a paradox, so we don't fall trapped to dualistic thinking. I'm trying to make them fun, and I'm sure people will enjoy the art, but I was also hoping they would get a little fun out of the wisdom of life paradoxes.
And when are you hoping to produce it?
It's been produced, and we've been holding on to it for the right time. It's 2015. I'm sure it'll be out this year.
Do you have a title for it yet, or is that under wraps?
The Dichotomies of Life. That says it all. Look it up. Look up what a dichotomy is.
I love it. What would you want the world to know right now? What shift do we need to make as an individual and as a collective?
I want the world to know right now what I wanted the world to know when I was a senior at University of California, Berkeley. Was the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, and as a scientific group who concurred with 99.999% of all meteorologists and all scientists around the world 25 years ago, that global climate change is not only real, it's very, very serious. That's what I want the world to know. But now, let's get to the solution that nobody's invoked. Let's look at the last 25 years and the Copenhagen treaties, the ozone treaties, carbon reduction taxes, and all other forms of human beings trying to mitigate this very real ecological threat. None of it's worked. We have not even begun to address global climate change for the simple fact that every single strategy has been confrontational. As someone who participated in the international legal massage of the Montreal Protocol and all the subsequent treaties, and getting rid of all the CFCs and all those ozone depleting chemicals, well, isn't that special? We were all such heretics back in the late 80s, and now we all have been told that we all have to deal with skin cancer. Okay? So, again, back to global climate change. 25 years of almost nothing, of all confrontational us and them strategies of dealing with an imminent threat that undermines both the ecological and economical future of our grandchildren, guaranteed. So, how are we going to cope with this problem in a non-confrontational way? God help me, God, I'm only seeing one solution, and it's so simple, and it's so automatic, and I guarantee you it's going to work, and it's not flying technoplanes up in the atmosphere and dumping a bunch of more chemicals to put shade over the planet, and it's not a corporate carbon reduction tax that peel-out characters can use to make more money, and it's not an international treaty for us to be confrontational with China and India and all those other countries who are 50 or 80 years behind us, trying to be like us and believe that they deserve what we believe, and this is our problem. None of that has worked. Here's the solution. Here's the solution. The solution goes back to the class ahead of me when I graduated high school. We have a protocol in the United States. Most high schools do this, is by the time the seniors get ready to graduate, they have a fundraiser for a senior trip. And we did it too. We had our fundraisers and we had our senior trip. The class ahead of me in high school, you see, I grew up in a logging community on the other volcano, Mount St. Helens. Everything on our volcano was connected to the logging industry. So the senior class, when I was a junior, as their fundraiser, they went up on the mountain, ravaged by that volcanic, and planted trees. They planted trees for money so that they could go on their senior trip. Well, all the history of our high school, no senior class ever had the senior trip like these guys. They went to Disneyland and all the bills were paid by planting trees. So what I'm saying here and now, is if you want to solve global climate change, the vested interests, the people who want to do it, who are going to inherit the nightmare, again, vested interests, who's going to have to live with this is the children. We are not going to solve this problem through confrontational politics, taxation, or international treaties. Here's how we solve this problem. Every high school, planet-wide, before they graduate, before they go to college, before they go to the military, or before they crank out kids and raise a family, every high school in the world, one weekend before they graduate, go out and plant trees. It's their future, it's their air, it's their money, and it's their economy. What I'm saying, whether we like it or not, is we've already screwed up on that one. I try to do the best that I can as a formally trained environmental science to get the word out. It's on public record of all the symposiums and conferences we've had, both scientific conferences and legal conferences. You know what? Back to what I said. 25 years, the problem is not being dealt with. We need the heads of state and the mayor of every state, of every nation, of every country to mandate that when these kids go between high school level education and college education, that army needs to get out at least for one weekend and plant their trees. That sows their future. Problem solved.
Beautiful. Hallelujah. What does the term salt of the earth mean to you?
Salt of the earth to me means indigenous people, and there's nobody I love more because they're so humble.
Would you consider yourself salt of the earth?
I consider my lifestyle the salt of the earth.
How would you like to be remembered?
I want to be remembered in two ways publicly. I'd like to be remembered one way privately. I would like to be remembered in public for two reasons. Someone who genuinely cared about all people, and someone who always did more than what he was expected. In private, my inner circle, I just want to be remembered as the greatest artist that they've ever seen.
Thank you so much for sharing with me, and I really love and respect you. Thanks for your time.
I'm not going to take any of that back. So good on us.